The air conditioner in my car made a sound like someone clearing their throat and then giving up. I didn't turn it off. I just drove. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I had $73 in a checking account my brother knew about and about $4.2 million in one he didn't. I let him think the 73 was everything. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I was the family's mistake that kept costing money. It started when I was 6. I had an undiagnosed heart condition, nothing dramatic, a small structural defect that nobody caught until I collapsed at a school carnival. My parents rushed me to the ER. I had a procedure. I recovered completely. Textbook outcome. The kind of thing that in a normal family becomes a story you tell at Thanksgiving with relief. Remember when Claire scared us half to death? We're so glad she's okay. My family told it differently. My father's version involved a number $80,000. That was what the insurance didn't cover. He said it the way some people say a criminal sentence, not as a fact, but as a verdict. For years, anytime I asked for anything, a school trip, new shoes, a laptop for college applications, that number came out. Do you know what you cost us when you were 6? By the time I was 15, I'd stopped asking for things. By the time I was 22, I'd stopped expecting anything. By the time I was 28, I was making $340,000 a year as a software architect at a mid-sized fintech company in Austin, and I hadn't told a single member of my family. Let me explain why I stayed. I know that's the first question. It's always the first question, and honestly, I understand it. I had money. I had options. I had an entirely separate life that my family knew nothing about. A savings account, a brokerage account, a 401k that would have made my brother's eyes go still and cold if he'd seen the balance. I could have rented an apartment anywhere. I could have left. I stayed because of my mother. Not because she was kind to me. She wasn't, not consistently. But she was sick. Early-stage Parkinson's, diagnosed 2 years before all of this happened, and I stayed because I thought presence meant something. I thought if I was there, in the house, making dinner twice a week and driving her to her Thursday appointments, that counted for something even if nobody acknowledged it. I was wrong about that. But I stayed. I paid rent. My brother Marcus had convinced my parents to charge me $800 a month to live in my childhood bedroom, which he had personally converted to a home office before I moved back in, so I'd been sleeping on a pull-out couch for 11 months. My name was on nothing in that house except the utility bill, which Marcus had also convinced my parents to put in my name because, as he explained it, I was the one home during the day sometimes and it made sense logistically. I paid the utility bill. I paid the rent. I bought groceries twice a week. I drove my mother to her appointments. I fixed the back fence when it fell down in a storm because my father's back hurt. I did all of this in a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door, wearing clothes I'd bought at Target, because nobody in my family knew I could afford anything different. I kept it that way on purpose. My brother Marcus was 35, lived 40 minutes away in a house he'd bought with a down payment that came from my parents' retirement account, a loan he had never repaid, that everyone pretended was a gift. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, made decent money, spent more than he made, and had been borrowing from my parents in small increments for years. He was charming. He remembered birthdays. He called my father every Sunday. He was the son they'd always wanted, and they loved him without conditions or ledgers. And every time I sat across from him at the dinner table, I could see him calculating. He was always calculating. I should have left the first time he went through my mail. I came home one afternoon in October to find him at the kitchen table with what I immediately recognized as my brokerage statement. I've forgotten to shred it, left it in the recycling bin, and he had pulled it out and unfolded it and was sitting there reading it with the kind of focus I had never once seen him give to anything that didn't benefit him. I stood in the doorway. He looked up. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. Then he folded it carefully and set it on the table and said, "Claire, we need to talk about what you're contributing to this family." I took the statement off the table, walked to my room, and called my attorney. Her name is Dana. She'd been my personal attorney for 3 years by that point. Estate planning, contracts, the kind of thing you do quietly when you have assets you want to protect. I told her what happened. She told me to document everything, change all my passwords immediately, set up mail forwarding to a PO box, and start looking for an exit. I did all of that. And then I did one more thing. I started paying attention. The next 6 weeks were educational. Marcus started coming around more. He and my father had long conversations in the garage that stopped when I walked through the door. My mother started mentioning with careful casualness that Marcus had been under a lot of financial pressure lately, and that family takes care of family. My father, who had never once asked about my career in any meaningful way, suddenly wanted to know where I worked, what my benefits were like, whether I had a 401k. I answered vaguely. I'd had years of practice being vague. Then one evening in November, Marcus sat me down at the kitchen table, my parents conspicuously absent, and explained that he had found a great investment opportunity, a real estate fund. Minimum contribution of $50,000. He had done the research, he said. The returns were excellent. He was putting in 20 himself. He thought it would be a good way for me to finally build some real wealth. I looked at him. The fund he described didn't exist. I'd checked within 30 seconds of him first mentioning it the previous week when he brought it up as a casual aside. There was a website, freshly built, thin, the kind of template site you can put up in an afternoon. The principals listed had LinkedIn profiles created within the last 60 days. The address was a UPS store in Scottsdale. "I'll think about it," I said. He smiled. "Don't wait too long, these windows close." I smiled back. "I know." I called Dana that night and told her what I was looking at. She said to keep documenting. I said I already was. December came, and everything accelerated. My father called me into the living room on a Sunday and told me, with the tone of someone delivering a verdict, that they had decided to give my room to my cousin Brittany, who was 19 and moving to Austin for school and needed somewhere to stay. He said it plainly, without apology. My room, the pull-out couch I'd been on for 11 months, wasn't enough apparently. They needed the actual room. I could find somewhere else. I asked where they suggested I go. My father said, and I will remember this for the rest of my life, "You're a grown woman, Claire. Figure it out." My mother was sitting in the armchair by the window. She didn't say anything. Marcus was in the kitchen. I could hear him opening the refrigerator. I went back to my room for a few more days, and sat on the edge of the pull-out couch and looked at the wall and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness, something quieter and more permanent. The specific feeling of a door closing and realizing you never actually wanted to open anyway. I texted Dana, "It's time." She texted back, "I know. Ready when you are." Here's what Dana and I had spent 6 weeks building. A company called Meridian Tier Holdings, Texas LLC, registered properly, real address, Dana's office, with permission. Clean website, verifiable principals, real track records constructed from publicly available data about legitimate deals we repackaged under the Meridian name, not fraudulent, legal in every way, just opaque, the kind of entity that if you were unsophisticated you could mistake for something you might want to get close to. We did not approach Marcus. We let Marcus approach us. I had mentioned Meridian once to my mother. Casually. I said a company I'd done some consulting work for had offered me equity. I said the name. I said it was probably nothing. I said it in the kitchen while I was making coffee, loud enough for my father to hear from the next room. Within 4 days, Marcus called me. He had looked into Meridian. He was impressed. He had some investors who might be interested. Did I still have a contact there? I gave him a number. The number reached Dana's paralegal, who played the role of a client relations associate. Her name, for these purposes, was Jennifer. Jennifer was excellent. Jennifer took meetings seriously. The meeting happened on a Tuesday in January at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. Marcus brought my father. That surprised me a little. I hadn't expected my father, but it made a cold kind of sense. My father had retirement savings. Marcus had already gone through his own credit lines. Jennifer was professional and measured and said very little that was committal. She described Meridian's structure in accurate, boring terms. She mentioned minimum participation thresholds. She mentioned exclusivity. She mentioned that interest from other parties had been strong. My father asked about returns. Jennifer described realistic ones. My father leaned back in his chair and looked at Marcus with an expression I recognized, the look of a man who has decided to trust someone who has never earned it. On the drive home, Marcus called me. He said he thought this was real. He said my father wanted in. He said he wanted to move quickly. I said I would see what I could do. 3 weeks later, Marcus transferred $47,000 to Meridian's account. It was money he had borrowed, I found out later, partly from a personal loan and partly from my parents, specifically from a savings account my mother kept for medical expenses. My mother's medical expense account. He used that. I sat with that information for a while. My father signed paperwork the same day. He contributed $31,000. His signature was on a document that Dana had drafted, which included, in clear language, in a section titled Disclosure and Investor Acknowledgement, a clause stating that the contribution was voluntary, that no guaranteed returns were promised, and that the investor confirmed the funds were their own, unencumbered, and that they were not contributing funds held in trust or designated for specific medical or legal obligations. My father signed it. He didn't read it. Marcus witnessed the signature. I didn't touch that money. I want to be very clear about that. Neither dollar of it moved out of the escrow account it landed in. That was always the plan. Not to take anything, but to hold it long enough to establish the paper trail and then return it through a process that would require both of them to explain in writing where it came from and why. That process is called an audit. In February, I found out what my brother had done with my identity. I checked my credit report on a Thursday morning. I checked it monthly, had for years, and found a hard inquiry I didn't recognize, followed by an open line of credit in my name at a bank I had never done business with, $8,000 limit, opened 6 weeks earlier. A billing address in Marcus's zip code. I called Dana before I'd finished my coffee. She called it what it was. Identity theft. Federal crime. She said we needed to report it immediately and let the process move at its own speed. I said I understood. I filed the report that afternoon. FTC, then the bank directly, then a follow-up with the local field office Dana had a contact at. Then I did the thing that nobody expected. I didn't say a word to my family. I drove to the house that Sunday for dinner like I did most Sundays. I helped my mother with her coat. I passed the rolls. I listened to my father tell a story about a neighbor's dog. I washed 2 pans after dinner and said good night and drove home in my 10-year-old Honda with the dented door, and I didn't say a single word. Marcus sat across from me the whole time and he looked comfortable. He looked like a man with a plan. He had no idea I had filed 17 pages of documentation with the federal government 4 days earlier. March was when it came apart for him. The bank's fraud department had been moving quietly since February. Dana's contact at the field office confirmed that the identity theft case had been flagged for additional review because of the pattern, the fraudulent line of credit alongside the suspicious investment solicitation aimed at a family member. When investigators looked at Marcus's financial history, what they found was not a one-time mistake. It was a pattern across 4 years, involving credit accounts opened in my name, a car loan in my mother's name that she had no knowledge of, and the one that sealed it, a falsified income verification submitted as part of a mortgage refinancing application that listed my annual salary as income he had claimed co-ownership of. He said on a federal document that I made $200,000 a year and that we shared finances. We did not share finances. We had never shared finances. We had never once had a joint account or a co-signed anything. He invented it. He typed it on a form and signed it and submitted it to a federally regulated financial institution. Dana called me the morning the investigators moved. She said it simply, "It's happening today." I was at my desk at work. I had a 10 a.m. stand-up with my team. I said, "Okay, thank you." And I went back to my screen and did my job. I didn't call my parents. I let them find out the way most people find out, in pieces, from sources they didn't control, in an order that made it hard to minimize. My father called me 4 days later. His voice was different. Not the verdict delivery tone. Something smaller. He said that Marcus was in serious trouble. He said there had been some kind of misunderstanding with finances. He said the family needed to come together. He used that phrase, come together, the way people use it when they mean come together to help me specifically. I said, I know about the credit accounts, Dad. Silence. I know about the mortgage application. I know about Mom's medical savings. I know about all of it. I've known for 2 months. He said, Claire. I filed the reports in February, I said. I didn't call you because I needed the investigators to move without interference. That's not me being cold. That's me making sure it was handled correctly. Another silence. Longer. Why didn't you come to us first? I thought about the carnival. I thought about $80,000 said like a verdict. I thought about the Sunday in December when my father told me to figure it out while my mother looked at the window and Marcus opened the refrigerator. Because the last time I came to you with a problem, I said, you handed me a bill for it. I didn't say it with anger. I said it the way you state a fact. The temperature outside, the time of day, the distance between 2 points. He didn't have an answer for that. The investigation concluded in April. Marcus was charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and making a false statement on a federal loan application. He hired an attorney. The case moved into the system and will continue moving through it for a long time. That's how these things work. The money in the Meridian escrow, my father's $31,000, and the portion of Marcus's contribution that had come from legitimate sources, was returned through the audit process I mentioned. It came back flagged, documented, with a paper trail that required my father to explain, in writing, that he had invested money he understood to be his own. He did that. The funds went back. He will not be investing in anything my brother recommends again. My mother's medical savings was a different matter. The bank eventually restored the fraudulently opened balance, but the process took time, and during those weeks my mother had 2 appointments she delayed because she wasn't sure what she had available. I found that out from her directly in a phone call in March, and that was the moment the last room inside me that had been left open for them quietly closed. I didn't slam it, I just closed it. I moved out in April. I had already put down a deposit in February on an apartment in South Austin, 2nd floor, good light, a kitchen I actually wanted to cook in. I hired movers. I drove over in the Honda, which still had the dent, and stood in the kitchen of my childhood home, while my mother watched me carry boxes and my father sat in the living room and didn't look up. I set my key on the counter. I said, I'll still drive you to your Thursday appointments, Mom. Text me when you need me. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, you didn't have to do it this way. I thought about that. I thought about Marcus at the kitchen table with my brokerage statement. I thought about the cruise my father had booked with the money from the Brittany arrangement. Yes, there was a cruise. My parents took a cruise to celebrate things settling down in January while I was filing federal documentation. I thought about the utility bill in my name, and the $800 a month for a pullout couch and the medical savings account, and 23 years of carrying a number like a sentence. I know, I said, but neither did you. I picked up the last box and walked out. I work from home now mostly. My apartment has a real desk and a real chair and a coffee maker I actually like. I have a plant on the windowsill that I've kept alive for 4 months, which feels like an achievement. Dana and I had lunch last month. She asked how I was doing and I told her the truth, that I was fine, genuinely, in the plain way that word is supposed to mean. Not performing fine, not building towards something, just fine. She asked if I had any regrets about how it played out. I thought about it for a real minute, not performing consideration, actually thinking. No, I said. The regret would have been staying. She nodded. She ordered the salmon. We talked about something else. I still drive the Honda. I've been meaning to get something new, and I will eventually, but there's something I like about it, the dent, the rattling AC, the fact that nobody who looks at it in a parking lot thinks anything about who might be driving it. There's a kind of freedom in being underestimated that I spent a long time resenting and have only recently started to appreciate. My brother underestimated me. My father underestimated me. For 23 years, they looked at the Honda and the Target clothes and the checking account with $73 and they saw the extent of me. They didn't see the 4 years of documentation. They didn't see Dana. They didn't see Meridian Tier Holdings, LLC. Registered in the state of Texas, fully legal, built for exactly one purpose. They saw what I let them see. That was always the plan. People ask me if I feel guilty. Not many people, but some. Usually they phrase it carefully. Do you think it went too far? The way you ask a question when you already have an opinion about the answer. I've thought about it honestly. I don't think guilt is the wrong instinct to examine. It means you're paying attention to the cost of things. But when I sit with what actually happened, not the version where I'm the cold strategist, not the version where I'm the tragic victim, just what actually happened, I don't find guilt there. I find something more like clarity. Marcus made choices. He made them across 4 years in small increments, the way people do when they've convinced themselves that what they're taking isn't really stealing. A credit account here, a signature forged there, a number typed on a federal form that wasn't true. Each one felt manageable to him, I think. Each one felt like a problem solved. That's the thing about that kind of thinking. It works right up until it doesn't, and by the time it stops working, you've built so much on top of it that the whole structure comes down at once. I didn't cause that. He built it. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it. My father spent 20 years handing me a bill for being sick at 6 years old. He did it without cruelty, I think. Or at least without conscious cruelty. He did it the way people pass down the habits they were never asked to examine. He turned a number into a verdict and gave it to a child to carry, and the child carried it quietly for so long that he forgot she was carrying anything at all. That forgetting is what made everything else possible. You can only take what you think someone will never protect. I protected it. That's the thing I want to say clearly because I think it's the part that gets lost in the telling. I didn't win because I was smarter, or because I had money, or because Dana is excellent at her job, though she is. I held on because I refused to become the version of myself that the people around me had decided I was. That refusal is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's just a quiet, daily decision to keep your own records, to know your own numbers, to build something real in the space where other people project their assumptions. Integrity is not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being accurate, about yourself, about others, about what you will and won't absorb. Marcus was not accurate. My father was not accurate. For years, I absorbed their version of me because I didn't yet understand that I was allowed to write my own. The moment I understood that, everything else followed. Not easily, not quickly. But it followed. I still drive the Honda. The dent is still there. I've started to think I might keep it.